All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're going to be talking about something a little uncomfortable: our own minds. We're going to pull back the curtain on some of the psychological glitches and hidden biases that honestly run our lives in ways we almost never notice. This is going to be interesting.
So, I want to start with a really simple, really direct question for you. Are you a good person? Just think about it for a second. I mean, if you're like me, your gut reaction is probably, yeah, of course, right? We try to do the right thing, we have good intentions. But what if I told you the real story is a little more complicated than that?
Because here's the thing: decades of psychological research have shown us that how we see ourselves is often, well, a simplified, much more flattering version of a very complex reality. Our brains aren't these perfect, rational computers we imagine them to be. Not at all. In fact, they're loaded with hidden patterns and automatic reflexes that can lead us down some surprisingly dark paths.
Okay, so for this first part, let's really dig into our own deceptive minds. We're going to uncover some of the automatic shortcuts, the glitches in our thinking that our brains use every single day, usually without us even knowing it, just to make sense of everything.
You know, we all love to think of ourselves as these logical beings, right? We think we carefully weigh all the evidence before we come to a conclusion. But the truth is, to save time and energy, our brain is running on shortcuts all day long. And while that makes us super efficient, it's also the source of some of our biggest, most profound mistakes in thinking. Let's kick things off with a huge one: confirmation bias. The best way to think about this is like your brain has a personal bodyguard for every belief you hold. It goes out and actively looks for any information that says, yep, you were right, while totally ignoring or just dismissing anything that challenges you. It's like you're only ever seeing the evidence that proves what you already believe.
This quote from Anais Nin, wow, it just nails it. We don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. Our view of reality isn't some crystal clear window. Nope, it's more like a mirror, just reflecting our own stuff back at us: our beliefs, our hopes, our biases.
So, what you've got here is this huge gap between who we think we are and what we're actually doing. We tell ourselves this story that we're these objective truth seekers, but our mind, it's often playing a totally different game. It's not an impartial judge. It's more like a really motivated defense attorney, just constantly building a case for what it's already decided is true. All right, next up, we've got another one of these little mental glitches that, honestly, you've probably done a dozen times today without even realizing it. It's called the fundamental attribution error. It's a really powerful bias in how we explain why people do what they do, both other people and ourselves. Oh man, this example just makes it so clear. Someone else cuts you off in traffic. What's the first thought? What a jerk. That person is a terrible, selfish driver. We go straight to their character. But when we do the exact same thing, oh, suddenly there's a whole backstory. I'm late, I'm stressed, I didn't see them. We give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, the benefit of the situation, but we almost never give that same courtesy to other people. Okay, so we've seen how our own brains can trick us. But what happens when we throw other people into the equation? Because this next part is all about how the world outside of us, things like authority, group pressure, can sometimes completely hijack our own sense of right and wrong. And this is where what we think we are really bumps up against the truth. We love this idea of ourselves as independent thinkers, captains of our own ship. But the psychological reality is that we are deeply social creatures, and we are constantly looking for cues from those around us, especially from the people in charge. To really get how big this influence is, we have to talk about one of the most famous and, frankly, most chilling experiments ever done. It posed a pretty simple question: just how far will an ordinary person go when they're told to do something by an authority figure, even if it involves hurting someone else? So picture this. A volunteer, the teacher, sits in front of a big, intimidating shock generator. In the next room, there's a learner, who's actually an actor, and looking over the teacher's shoulder is a researcher in a white lab coat. The instruction is simple. For every wrong answer the learner gives, you have to deliver an electric shock, and you have to increase the voltage each time. And as the shocks get stronger, the learner in the other room starts to scream in pain, they beg for it to stop, and then eventually they just go silent. So I'm going to ask you, put yourself in that chair. You've got an authority figure telling you the experiment requires that you continue, and you've got a person screaming from the other room. What percentage of regular, everyday people just like you, do you think went all the way? All the way to that final 450-volt switch, marked with XXX. The answer is 65%.
Let that sink in for a second. 2 out of every 3 people obeyed the experimenter and delivered what they believed was a fatal electric shock. That number sent shockwaves around the world. It shocked the researchers themselves. And this right here, this is the part that is so important to understand. These participants weren't evil. They weren't monsters. They were sweating, they were trembling, they were arguing with the researcher, but most of them still did it. And that reveals a really chilling truth. It's not always about your character. Sometimes the situation itself, especially pressure from authority, can make good, ordinary people do terrible things. Now, I know hearing all this can be, well, it can be a little tough. It can make you feel like we're all just fundamentally broken. But this last section asks a really critical question. Why? Why on earth do we have these tendencies baked into our psychology in the first place? It's really easy to look at stuff like confirmation bias or blindly following orders and think of them as just bugs, right? Glitches in the human code that we need to patch. But what if that's completely the wrong way to look at it? Because the modern way of looking at this in psychology suggests that a lot of these traits aren't bugs at all. They're features. They're adaptations that probably helped our ancestors survive in a world that was very, very different from ours. I mean, just think about it from an ancient survival point of view. Our biases, they were fast mental shortcuts that saved precious brain energy. Conforming to the group and obeying the tribal leader, that was absolutely essential for safety. Being cast out of the tribe was a death sentence. And that tendency to judge others quickly, making a snap judgment about a stranger, are they friend or foe, that could have been the skill that kept you alive. These weren't flaws, they were survival tools for a world that just doesn't really exist anymore. And this right here, this is the hopeful part. This knowledge isn't supposed to be some depressing verdict on humanity. Think of it more like a user manual for your own brain. By understanding these built-in tendencies, by just being aware that they exist, we give ourselves the power to spot them when they're happening and maybe, just maybe, choose a different path. Which brings us right back to that big question. After seeing how easily our minds can deceive us and how vulnerable we are to pressure, are we just doomed? Are we slaves to the darker parts of our own psychology?
Absolutely not. The real danger, the only real dark truth, isn't that these tendencies exist in all of us. It's the arrogance of believing they don't exist in you. The person who says, "Oh, I would never do that," or "I'm not biased at all," that's the person who is most in danger. Real wisdom, and maybe even real goodness, starts with the humility to admit that, yeah, you have these flaws and vulnerabilities too.
Because acknowledging that dark side, that's the first and most important step toward bringing it into the light. Thanks so much for joining me. Keep questioning and keep learning.